They called her unworthy of love, so love came for her in a form the world called monster. The tower room smelled of mildew and abandonment, though Margot had lived there for 3 years. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the village below prepare for the Harvest Moon Festival. Lanterns bloomed like fireflies. Laughter drifted upward on autumn wind. She recognized the voices, girls who'd once been her friends, before her body became something they whispered about in hallways. Fat Margot in her tower, they'd sung outside her window last spring. Too heavy for the stairs, too ugly for the world. Her parents had moved her here after the incident at the market. A boy had recoiled from her touch as if burned. His friends had laughed. Her mother had wept. Her father had built the tower room with his own hands, stone by stone, as if architecture could contain shame. Now she was 23, and the world had forgotten her except as cautionary tale. Margot turned from the window and lit 3 candles. The physician had left her medications, tonics for melancholy, powders for sleep. She no longer took them. What was the point of numbing pain that had become identity? She opened her journal to a blank page and wrote, Day 1, 095. Still breathing, still unworthy, still here. The wind changed. Margot felt it before she heard it, a shift in atmospheric pressure that made her candle flames bend horizontal. Then came the sound. Not footsteps on stairs, but something moving through air itself. The window exploded inward, glass and moonlight and impossible speed. Margot stumbled backward, striking her hip against the bed frame, heart hammering against ribs like a prisoner demanding release. A man stood in her shattered window frame. No, not a man. Something wearing a man's shape the way silk wears a body. Beautiful, precise, and utterly wrong for the architecture beneath. He was tall, dressed in clothes from another century. Black wool coat, silver buttons, boots that had walked through kingdoms now dust. His face was angular perfection, cheekbones sharp enough to cut shadow, eyes the color of winter storms. Dark hair fell past his collar, moving in wind that had stopped the moment he entered. Margot's voice emerged as whisper. You're not real. Neither are you, he said, and his accent carried centuries. According to them. He gestured toward the village below, where festival music played on, oblivious. Margot's hand found her throat, feeling pulse race beneath skin. Every survival instinct screamed predator, yet he hadn't moved toward her. He simply stood there, studying her with the intensity of someone reading scripture. Who are you? She managed. Nathaniel Crowe. He stepped down from the window ledge with preternatural grace. Alpha of the Northern Covenant, and you are Margot Thorne, the girl they locked away because your body didn't fit their narrow definition of deserving. She should have been terrified. Instead, fury bloomed. Did they send you? Is this some new cruelty? Come to mock the monster in the tower. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite smile, not quite pain. I don't mock what I understand. He moved closer, each step deliberate, giving her time to retreat. I've been watching you, Margot. 3 months. Every night you write in that journal. Every morning you wake and choose to face another day in this prison they built from shame and fear. You've been watching me. The violation should have felt worse than it did. Observing, he corrected. There's a difference. I observe because I recognize something the world has forgotten how to see. And what's that? Worth. The word fell between them like dropped stone. Strength, the kind of courage it takes to survive what breaks others. Margot laughed, bitter and broken. I'm not strong, I'm just... Still here? Exactly. Nathaniel stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of his chest. No rise and fall of breath, no pulse visible at throat. Do you know how many mortals I've watched give up on less? Your isolation would shatter most minds within months. Yet you write poetry by candlelight. You tend the garden box on your windowsill. You choose, every single morning, to continue existing in a world that tells you you shouldn't. Why are you here? Margot whispered. His storm-gray eyes held hers. Because 300 years ago I made a vow to use eternity protecting those the world deems expendable. The abandoned, the rejected, the ones locked in towers. He extended his hand, palm up, offering nothing but choice. And because tonight, I've decided that if you'll permit it, you're done being their prisoner. Margot stared at his outstretched hand, pale, unlined, holding steady in a way human hands never could. "What are you really?" she asked. "Damned," he said simply, "cursed with immortality for sins I no longer remember. But damnation gave me time to learn something the mortal world keeps forgetting." "What?" "That the body is just architecture." His voice dropped to something raw. "The soul is the masterpiece, and yours, Margot Thorne, is extraordinary." The candles flickered, the festival music swelled below, and Margot looked at this impossible creature who'd shattered her window to tell her she wasn't broken. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. But she didn't pull away either. Nathaniel didn't pressure her decision. He simply settled into the worn armchair by her bookshelf as if he'd been invited, his supernatural stillness making the room feel suddenly smaller. "You can't stay here," Margot said, though her voice carried no conviction. "I've been here every night for 3 months," he replied. "You simply didn't see me." The violation of that statement should have terrified her. Instead, Margot found herself asking, "Why me?" Nathaniel's gaze traveled to her journal, still open on the small desk. "May I?" She should have said no. Privacy was the only possession they'd left her. But something in his expression, ancient grief wearing modern features, made her nod. He lifted the journal with reverence reserved for holy texts. His eyes moved across her handwriting, and she watched his jaw tighten with each entry. When he spoke, his voice carried weight of centuries. Day 847. Maybe if I stop eating, I'll become small enough to be loved. He looked up, and his eyes had gone completely black. "You wrote that 2 years ago. You nearly succeeded." Margot wrapped her arms around herself. "How do you—" "Because I found you on day 873, unconscious, pulse so faint even I almost missed it." His hands trembled, the first human gesture she'd seen him make. "I broke every rule of my covenant that night, entered uninvited, forced vampire blood past your lips, not enough to turn you, just enough to pull you back from the edge you'd thrown yourself over." The room tilted. Margot gripped the bedpost. "That was you?" "I told myself it was mercy, that I was saving a life the way I've saved hundreds." Nathaniel set the journal down with excessive care. "But the truth. I was saving myself from watching someone extraordinary extinguish herself because the world convinced her she was worthless." "I'm not extraordinary. You write poetry about stars you can only see through a single window. You've read every book in this room 17 times and found new meaning with each pass. You tend plants in a prison cell. You survive, Margot, every single day." He stood, and his height filled the space between floor and ceiling. "Do you know what I've learned in 3 centuries? The world doesn't lock away the worthless. They lock away what scares them. And you, with your unbreakable spirit housed in a body they can't control or define, you terrify them." Margot's throat closed around words she'd never dared speak. "They're my family. Family doesn't build cages." Nathaniel moved to the window, moonlight turning him silver in shadow. "I was mortal once, had a wife, a daughter. They died of plague while I was away at war. I came home to empty rooms and guilt so vast it swallowed me whole." "I'm sorry. Don't be. That tragedy led me to the vampire who offered me immortality. I accepted. thinking eternal life would let me protect everyone I'd failed to save. His laugh was broken glass. Instead, I learned that living forever means watching the world repeat the same cruelties in different costumes: persecution, isolation, the systematic destruction of anyone who doesn't fit their narrow vision of deserving. He turned back to her, and his expression held such naked pain that Margot took an involuntary step forward. I became Alpha because someone had to protect the ones the world wants erased. Witches hunted for healing. Mothers burned for being too beautiful or too plain. Children abandoned for being born wrong. His voice dropped. And girls locked in towers for taking up space. "What are you offering me?" Margot whispered. "Choice." Nathaniel extended his hand again. "Come with me tonight, not to be turned, not to be saved, but to be seen. My covenant has 17 members. Every single one was rejected by the mortal world for reasons ranging from scars to heritage to loving the wrong person. We've built something those villagers can't understand. A family based on chosen worth rather than given value. And if I say no? Then I'll continue watching over you, ensuring you eat, whispering in your parents' dreams until they feel compelled to visit, breaking the isolation that's killing you cell by cell." His hand remained steady. "But I'd rather show you what life looks like when you're surrounded by people who see your soul before your silhouette." Margot looked at his offered hand, pale, steady, holding promise of something she'd stopped believing existed: belonging. "I'm not brave," she said. "Bravery is continuing when every cell screams to surrender. You've been brave every moment of your captivity." Nathaniel's voice softened. "Let someone else be brave for you, just this once." The festival music swelled, laughter echoed, life continued below, indifferent to the girl in the tower and the vampire offering resurrection. Margot thought of her journal. 95 days of surviving, of waking up, of refusing to disappear despite the world's insistence. She thought of the physician's sleeping powder she no longer took, because numbness felt worse than pain. She thought of the stars she'd memorized through one window, teaching herself constellations from library books, and she thought, what if there are more stars than this? Margot placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, cool, strong, impossibly gentle. "You won't regret this." "I already do," she whispered, but she didn't let go. Nathaniel lifted her as if she weighed nothing, not with effort, but with the ease of moonlight carrying darkness. "Hold on," he murmured against her hair. Then they were falling upward. Margot buried her face in his chest as wind screamed past, her stomach dropping into freefall. But his arms never wavered, his body a constant in chaos. She could hear his voice, low and steady, counting heartbeats she didn't possess. "Open your eyes." She did. The village sprawled below like a constellation fallen to earth. Lanterns traced cobblestone streets. The church spire pierced upward, and there, impossibly small now, was her tower window. A single lit square in stone architecture built to contain shame. "You lived in that," Nathaniel said, and his voice held reverence. "And you survived." They weren't falling. They were flying. Margot had read about this in books, vampires moving through air like silk through water. But reading couldn't capture the sensation of wind against skin, the way moonlight felt tangible up here, the absolute trust required to remain relaxed in another being's arms while earth and sky exchanged positions. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home." The word carried weight of promise. The North Estate, 20 miles outside any human settlement, big enough that 17 immortals never feel crowded, isolated enough that we can be fully ourselves. They flew over forest, silver-touched treetops rolling like frozen ocean. Margot found herself watching Nathaniel's profile, the sharp jaw, the ancient eyes, the way his hair moved in wind that should have torn him from sky. "Why did you really come for me?" she asked. "The truth," His arms tightened fractionally. "Because 3 months ago, I stood beneath your window and heard you singing. Do you remember?" She did. A hymn her grandmother had taught her, about mercy finding the lost. "Your voice." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "It was the first thing in 2 centuries that made me feel human again. Not the vampirism. That's just biology. But the humanity I thought I'd buried with my family. You sang about mercy, and I realized I'd been performing it without feeling it, saving people mechanically, going through immortal motions. And my singing changed that? Your existence changed that." He looked down at her, and his eyes reflected starlight. "You carry mercy in your bones, despite receiving none. You tend beauty in a cell. You survive ugliness and somehow remain soft. That's not weakness, Margot. That's revolutionary." The forest opened onto clearing, and Margot's breath caught. The North Estate wasn't a house. It was a sanctuary carved from moonlight and stone. Gothic architecture rose 3 stories, all arched windows and ivy-covered walls. Gardens sprawled around it, wild and intentional simultaneously. Statues emerged from hedges. A fountain caught starlight in its basin. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's yours." Nathaniel descended slowly, giving her time to absorb. "If you choose it." They landed in the main courtyard, and immediately figures emerged from shadows. 17 vampires, each one unique in age and appearance, each one watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to recognition. A woman stepped forward first. She wore men's clothing from the 1920s, had a scar running through one eyebrow, and moved with predatory grace. "You actually brought her." "Margot," Nathaniel said gently, setting her on her feet but keeping one hand at her back. "This is Elena, my second. She was locked in an asylum for refusing to marry." Elena's smile was sharp. "They called it hysteria. I called it having standards." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the island of misfit immortals, girl. You'll fit perfectly." More introductions followed. Marcus turned at 17 for the crime of being born with a twisted spine. Yuki, Japanese immigrant executed for stealing work from white laborers. David and James, hanged for loving each other. Zara, burned for practicing medicine while female. Each vampire carried history in their bones. Each one had been deemed unworthy by mortals who couldn't see past surface to soul. "We don't bite," Marcus said with crooked grin, "unless asked nicely." Margot found herself laughing, actual laughter, the first in years that didn't taste like broken glass. Nathaniel's hand pressed gently against her back. "There's a room prepared for you. East wing, overlooking the rose garden. But first," he turned her toward the estate's main entrance, where torches blazed welcome. "We have a tradition. Each new member receives a gift, something representing who they are, not what the world called them." "I'm not a member," Margot said. "I'm not immortal yet." Elena's grin widened. "But chosen, absolutely." They led her inside, and Margot stopped breathing. The entry hall was 3 stories of carved beauty. Stained glass windows depicted not religious scenes, but moments of mercy. A hand reaching down, a person being pulled from water, someone standing between victim and blade. Bookshelves lined every wall, ascending toward ceiling frescoes of night sky. "Library," Nathaniel explained. 17,000 volumes, growing constantly. You mentioned in your journal that you'd read everything in your room 17 times. His voice softened. "Consider this your new room." Margot's eyes burned. "I can't." "You can." He guided her to a chair positioned perfectly beneath skylight. Moonlight poured down like blessing. On the chair's arm sat a leather-bound book, title embossed in silver. Poems written in towers. An anthology of survival. "Open it," Elena urged. Margot's hands shook as she lifted the cover. The first page held a single line in familiar handwriting, her own, transcribed from her journal. Day 1, Joe 95. Still breathing, still unworthy, still here. She turned the page. More entries, dating back 3 years. Someone had copied her journal entirely, transforming survival into anthology. "You made me a book," she whispered. "You are a book," Nathaniel corrected. "We just gave you covers. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you." They gave her space after the book. Margot sat in that chair beneath the skylight while the Covenant dispersed into evening routines. She could hear them throughout the estate, Marcus playing piano in the East Wing, Elena sparring with someone in the courtyard, voices rising and falling in conversation that sounded like family. She opened her book again, reading entries she'd written in despair, now transformed into something approaching art. Someone had annotated the margins, not critically, but with understanding. Day 284. Maybe hunger is just another tower. The body as architecture, brilliant. Day 512. I dreamed I was a bird, woke up and remembered birds have hollow bones, mine are just heavy. Flight is internal first. Nathaniel's handwriting. He'd read every word, understood every metaphor, seen every moment she'd believed herself invisible. Heavy thoughts for your first night of freedom. Margot looked up. Nathaniel stood at the library's entrance, changed into simpler clothes, dark linen shirt, worn trousers, more relaxed than the formal predator who'd crashed through her window. It doesn't feel real, she admitted. Good. He approached slowly, always giving her space to object. Reality was killing you. Consider this merciful fiction. You don't have to watch over me anymore. I'm here. I'm safe. Watching over you was never obligation. Nathaniel settled into the chair opposite hers. It was privilege. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but full. Margot studied this ancient being who'd chosen her, of all people. His face could have been carved by Renaissance masters. His eyes held weight of centuries. His hands, resting loose on the chair arms, possessed the stillness of things that no longer needed to pretend life. How did you really die? She asked. Most people flinched from directness. Nathaniel smiled. Plague, 1722. I'd survived the initial outbreak by being away at war. Came home thinking I'd escaped. His gaze drifted to middle distance. Found my wife and daughter 3 days dead. Buried them in the garden we'd planted together. Then I caught it from their bodies. Final gift from the family I'd failed to protect. You didn't fail them. Logic knows that. Guilt doesn't care. He looked at her directly. The vampire who turned me found me digging my own grave, delirious with fever, convinced I deserved death. She asked me one question. Would you trade your death for the power to prevent others from dying alone? I said yes before I understood the cost. What cost? Watching everyone you save eventually die anyway. Learning that immortality doesn't prevent loss. It just extends the capacity for it. His voice dropped. For 2 centuries, I saved people, pulled them from fires, cured them with my blood, protected them from violence. And every single one died eventually, because mortality is patient. Then why continue? Because 3 months ago, I heard a girl sing about mercy while locked in a tower built by people who claimed to love her. Nathaniel leaned forward, elbows on knees. And I remembered something I'd forgotten. Saving someone isn't about preventing their death. It's about giving them the life they deserve until death comes naturally. Margot's throat tightened. You think I deserve this. I think you've survived what would break immortals. I think your capacity for beauty, despite ugliness, makes you more alive than most mortals manage in full lifetimes." He extended his hand again. Third time tonight, always offering rather than taking. "Walk with me?" She hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. He led her through the estate, and it was revelation. Every room held story. Marcus's music room with its 13 pianos from different eras, Elena's armory where swords hung like art, David and James's conservatory bursting with flowers they'd cultivated across decades. "We don't just exist here," Nathaniel explained as they climbed stairs to the estate's highest point. "We build, create, become who we would have been if the mortal world hadn't tried to erase us." They emerged onto the roof garden, and Margot gasped. The entire space was plants and starlight. Vegetables grew in raised beds. Fruit trees bloomed impossibly in autumn. Flowers she'd only read about tumbled from hanging baskets. And at the center, a telescope pointed toward heaven. "Yuki's project," Nathaniel said. "She's been mapping constellations for 60 years. Says the stars don't judge what you were, only where you're going." Margot walked to the roof's edge. Below, the estate spread in organized beauty. Beyond, forest rolled toward mountains. Above, stars blazed with clarity she'd never seen through her single-tower window. "Why me?" she asked again, needing to understand. "You could have anyone. Why the fat girl in the tower?" Nathaniel came to stand beside her. "Because worth isn't measured in pounds or inches or conventional beauty. Because I've lived 300 years and learned that the soul's capacity matters more than the body's shape." He turned to face her fully. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see someone who needed saving. I saw someone surviving. And survival is holiest act." "I'm not holy. Neither am I." His smile was broken and beautiful. "That's why we fit." Wind lifted her hair. Below, she could hear the covenant, laughter, music, life continuing in defiance of death. And beside her, this ancient creature watched her with expression suggesting she was the immortal, and he the one learning to live. "What if I can't do this?" Margot whispered. "What if I'm too broken?" "Then you'll be broken here, surrounded by people who understand that broken is just another word for having survived something that should have killed you." Nathaniel's hand found hers. "We don't require perfection, Margot. We require presence. Show up. Exist. Let yourself be seen. That's the only requirement." Margot looked at their joined hands, his pale and eternal, hers warm and temporary. The contrast should have highlighted difference. Instead, it felt like completion. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. Fear means you're alive enough to risk something." He squeezed gently. "Stay scared. Stay alive. Stay here." The stars wheeled overhead. The estate breathed below. And Margot Thorne, the girl they'd locked away for taking up space, stood on a roof garden and felt, for the first time in 3 years, like she might actually deserve the space she occupied. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I'll stay." Nathaniel's smile could have lit the world. "Thank you." "For what?" "Letting me save someone who didn't need saving." He looked toward the stars. "Turns out, that's all I ever really wanted." Margot woke to sunlight. For 3 years, her tower had faced north, constant shadow, minimal light. Now golden morning poured through east-facing windows, warming the massive bed where she'd slept 14 hours straight, dreamless and safe. The room itself was revelation. Not the sparse cells she'd known, but an actual living space. Bookshelves already filled with volumes on astronomy and poetry, a writing desk positioned to catch afternoon light, her journal from the tower placed carefully on the nightstand. Someone had unpacked her, cared enough to arrange her few possessions like they mattered. A knock interrupted her observation. "Margot?" Elena's voice carried through the door. "We have breakfast tradition." "Well, we watch you have breakfast. We make commentary. It's fun for everyone. Margot found herself smiling as she called, "Come in." Elena entered carrying a tray that smelled like heaven. "Marcus cooks. It's absurd. 200 years of immortality, and the boy can make eggs that would make angels weep." She set the tray on Margot's lap. "Also, there's a rule. First week, you don't leave this bed until you've eaten everything. Non-negotiable." "Why?" "Because Nathaniel told us what you did." Elena's voice softened. "Day 847. Nearly starved yourself believing smaller meant worthier. So now you eat, in bed. We're comfortable. We watch to ensure it happens, but mostly we watch because you're interesting and we're starved for interesting." The irony of vampires using starvation metaphors wasn't lost on Margot. But she ate. And Elena stayed, perched on the windowsill, telling stories about the Covenant's formation. How Nathaniel had found her in 1924, trapped in an asylum for refusing marriage. How she'd been his first intentional save, not random mercy, but deliberate choice to build family from the world's cast-offs. "He has type," Elena said. "People who survive what should have killed them, not physically, emotionally. You had every reason to give up. Didn't. That makes you family." "I'm not immortal. Yet." Elena's grin was sharp. "But that's choice you make when ready. No pressure, no timeline. Some of us waited decades before accepting the gift." Gift. Immortality lets you become who you would have been without the world's interference. Elena gestured at the estate beyond the window. Marcus is composing symphony cycle about survival. Yuki is mapping stars in 6 languages. David and James are writing botanical encyclopedia. We don't just exist, Margot. We become. And Nathaniel? Something flickered across Elena's face. Nathaniel saves people. It's what he's always done. But lately... She paused, choosing words carefully. Lately, he's been asking himself if saving is enough, or if he's using it to avoid addressing his own wounds. What wounds? The ones we all carry. Guilt, grief. The question every immortal faces eventually. What's the point of living forever? Elena stood, brushing invisible dust from her trousers. You're the first person I've seen make him ask that question with hope instead of despair. She left before Margot could respond. The morning passed in discovery. Margot explored her room thoroughly, finding clothing in her size, actual stylish clothing, not the shapeless dresses her mother had provided, books on subjects she'd only dreamed of accessing, art supplies, a window seat perfect for reading. Someone had built her a life. By afternoon, she ventured downstairs. The estate during daylight was different than midnight, quieter, more intimate. She found Marcus in the music room, playing something that sounded like heartbreak set to melody. Beethoven, he said without stopping. Moonlight Sonata. Appropriate for creatures of night, yes. Margot settled into the chair he indicated with head tilt. You don't have to entertain me, she said. Not entertaining. Processing. His fingers danced across keys. Nathaniel told us about your journal, the poetry, the way you turned survival into art. He transitioned into something faster, more hopeful. That's what we do here. Transform pain into creation. You'll find your medium. I'm not talented. Survival is the talent. Everything else is just practice. Marcus finished with flourish, then turned to face her. You know what Nathaniel said when he told us about you? Margot shook her head. He said, I found someone who reminds me why immortality matters. Not I saved someone, not I did mercy, but I found. Marcus's twisted spine didn't diminish his smile. You changed him. That's rare. Throughout the day, similar conversations happened. Yuki showed her the telescope, explaining how stars travel light years to reach Earth. Like you, traveled through darkness to arrive here. Zara offered to teach her herbalism. David and James insisted she join them for evening garden work. By sunset, Margot understood. The Covenant wasn't a collection of individuals. It was organism, each member cell in larger body dedicated to mutual survival. She found Nathaniel in the library, reading by lamplight. "Can I ask you something?" she said from the doorway. He looked up and his face transformed. "Anything." "Why do you save people who can't save you back?" The question hung between them like smoke. Nathaniel closed his book. Something ancient, pages thin as breath. "Because for 300 years, I've been trying to undo one failure. My wife, my daughter, the grave I dug that should have been mine." He stood, moving with that liquid grace. "And because saving people kept me from addressing the real question, which is, whether I deserve saving." His voice dropped to confession. "Every person I pull from darkness is evidence I'm not completely damned. But you." He approached slowly, always giving space. "You looked at me, vampire, killer, creature, and asked why I came for you. Not, thank you. Not, save me. But why? And I realized I wasn't saving you. I was hoping you'd save me." Nathaniel stopped 3 feet away, and his eyes held centuries of grief. From believing mercy is mechanical, from thinking eternal life is just extended existence, from forgetting what it feels like to want someone to survive because losing them would break something essential. Margot's breath caught. "You barely know me. I know you write poetry in prison cells. I know you tend plants in darkness. I know you survive ugliness and remain soft." His hand lifted, hovering near her face without touching. "I know that watching you exist made me remember what living actually means." The library felt suddenly smaller. Margot could smell him, something ancient and clean, like rain on stone, could see the inhuman stillness of his chest, the way lamplight didn't quite reflect correctly in his eyes. "What happens if I disappoint you?" she whispered. "Impossible." His hand finally made contact, thumb brushing her cheek. "You already did the hard part. You survived. Everything else is just learning to thrive." "I don't know how. Neither did any of us." His smile was gentle. "That's why we learn together." The evening bell rang, Marcus's signal for communal dinner. Even though the covenant didn't eat, they gathered for Margot's meals, creating ritual from necessity. Nathaniel offered his arm. "Shall we?" Margot took it, feeling the solid coolness of vampire flesh, and let herself be led toward family she never expected to deserve. 3 weeks passed like revelation. Margot learned the covenant's rhythms. Dawn when vampires retreated to deep sleep, daylight hours she had mostly to herself for reading and creation, sunset when they emerged like shadows gaining substance, evenings full of conversation and laughter, and slowly learning to trust that this wasn't temporary. She gained weight, actual healthy weight, eating meals Marcus prepared with the focus of alchemist. Her body stopped feeling like enemy and started resembling simply hers. She wrote, real writing, not survival journals, but actual poetry. Elena had found her a typewriter from the 1940s that clacked like percussion, and words poured out. Verse about towers and stars, about bodies as battlegrounds and hearts as sanctuaries. She learned vampire history from Yuki's books, learned healing herbs from Zara, learned that love between David and James looked no different than any love, tender, infuriating, essential. And she learned Nathaniel, how he watched her during communal dinners with expressions suggesting she was speaking revelations instead of simple observations. How he brought her books without asking, somehow knowing exactly what she needed. How his hand found hers during evening walks, and how that touch felt increasingly necessary. "You're staring," he said one night in the library. "You do it to me constantly." Fair point. His smile could have lit the world. "What are you thinking?" Margot closed her book, astronomy text she'd been pretending to read while actually watching him. That 3 weeks ago, I was locked in a tower, convinced I was unworthy of existing. And now I'm here, surrounded by family, feeling things I thought were reserved for people who looked different than me. What things? Happy, she whispered. Safe, like I might actually deserve this. Nathaniel set his own book aside. He'd been reading her poetry, she noticed. Can I tell you something that terrifies me? Please. I've lived 300 years, saved hundreds of people, built this covenant from nothing, and I've never felt what I feel when you walk into a room. His voice dropped to confession. Like suddenly, immortality has point. Like eternity might actually be gift instead of curse. Margot's heart hammered. Nathaniel, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for response. Just... He moved closer, and his eyes held storms. I need you to know that you changed everything, not by being saved, by existing so purely that you reminded me what's worth protecting. My body is perfect. His hand lifted to her face, cradling her jaw with reverence, because it survived, because it houses you, because every inch exists despite the world insisting it shouldn't. His thumb brushed her cheek. I've seen thousands of bodies across centuries, Margot. Yours is the first that made me understand the difference between flesh and soul. They'll say you're only interested because you're trying to save me. Let them. Nathaniel leaned closer, and his breath was cool against her skin. I know the truth. You saved me first. The kiss happened slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat. His lips touched hers with the gentleness of someone holding something precious, breakable, entirely irreplaceable. Margot had never been kissed, had believed no one would want to. Yet here was this ancient creature, this alpha vampire, kissing her like she was the miracle. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. Is this real? She whispered. More real than anything I've felt in 3 centuries. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. The attack came on the 4th week. Margot woke to screaming. Not anguish, fury. She stumbled from bed, pulling robe over nightgown, and rushed into the hallway. The estate was chaos. Vampires moving with combat precision, Elena barking orders, the smell of smoke and something worse, burning flesh. Stay in your room, Marcus shouted as he ran past. But Margot ran toward the sound instead. She found them in the entry hall, 6 vampires she didn't recognize, dressed in matched black, bearing wooden stakes and silver blades. And on the floor, ash marks where something had burned. Someone had been destroyed. The Southern Covenant? Elena snarled, blade in hand, facing down 2 attackers. They heard Nathaniel took a mortal, came to cleanse the contamination. Margot's blood turned to ice. This was because of her. She watched the fight unfold with horrified fascination. Elena moved like water and violence, disarming one attacker while Yuki and Zara took down another. David and James fought back to back, centuries of partnership making them single organism. But where was Nathaniel? Looking for the alpha? A voice behind her. Margot spun. A vampire stood there, female, ancient, with eyes like coal. She held a blade to Margot's throat before anyone could intervene. Pathetic, the woman said. Nathaniel Crow, Alpha of the North, risking his covenant for a mortal, a fat, worthless mortal at that. The words should have hurt, would have hurt 4 weeks ago. Now they just made Margot angry. If I'm so worthless, she said carefully, why does it take 6 of you to threaten me? The woman's eyes widened fractionally. Then Nathaniel was there. He didn't move. He manifested, existing suddenly between Margot and the blade. His hand closed around the woman's wrist, and Margot heard bones crunch. Delilah. His voice carried no heat, which made it terrifying. You violated neutral territory, attacked my family, and threatened the woman I love. He twisted, and the vampire's arm broke completely. "Give me one reason not to end your entire bloodline." "She's mortal," Delilah hissed. "You violate every covenant law." "I wrote those laws." Nathaniel's eyes had gone completely black. "And they say nothing about love, only about protection. I'm protecting her from you." The fight had stopped. Every vampire in the room watched as Nathaniel held Delilah suspended, her arm shattered, his power absolute. "Leave," he said quietly. "Tell the Southern Covenant that the North Estate is under my blood oath. Anyone who threatens my family will face me personally. And I've been alpha for 300 years because I'm very, very good at protecting what I choose." Delilah fell when he released her. She and her remaining allies fled, leaving ash and blood and broken weapons. Silence fell like curtain. Nathaniel turned to Margot, and his face transformed. "Are you hurt?" "No, but—" She gestured at the ash marks. "Who?" "Thomas." Elena's voice was flat. He was reading in the conservatory when they attacked. Margot felt her knees buckle. Thomas, quiet Thomas, who'd shown her his butterfly collection, who'd been turned in 1843 for being Catholic in Protestant England, who'd been part of this family for 182 years. Gone. Ash. Because of her. "This is my fault." She couldn't breathe. "They came for me. They came for hate." Nathaniel pulled her into his chest. "There's a difference." But Margot heard the words beneath. "If you weren't here, Thomas would be alive." She pulled away from Nathaniel's embrace. "I need to leave." "No." His voice was absolute. "You need to stay exactly where you're protected." "Protected?" She laughed, brittle. "Thomas died protecting me. How many more? How many members of your family burn because you decided to save a mortal?" "All of them," Nathaniel said simply. "I'd lose every single vampire in this covenant before I let anyone harm you." The declaration should have felt romantic. Instead, it felt like weight. Elena stepped forward. "Margot, look at me." Her scarred face held understanding. "Thomas knew the risks. We all do. This estate isn't safe haven because the world leaves us alone. It's safe haven because we make it safe, together. You're part of that now." "I'm mortal. I'm vulnerable. I'm loved," Yuki interrupted. "That makes you the most protected creature in 100 miles. It makes me target." "Good." Marcus's voice was hard. "Let them come. We've been passive too long. Let the Southern Covenant learn what happens when you threaten family." But Margot was already backing toward the stairs. "I can't be responsible for your deaths." "You're not." Nathaniel followed her. "Delilah is responsible. Hate is responsible. The world that taught them mortals are expendable is responsible." He caught her hand. "You're only responsible for surviving. Let us handle the rest. And if you die, I won't. You don't know that." Margot pulled free. "I need time. To think. To figure out if being here is worth everyone's life." She fled before he could stop her. Margot locked herself in her room for 3 days. They brought her food. She ate mechanically, knowing they'd worry otherwise. They brought her books. She couldn't focus. They brought her letters, the covenant, each one writing about why she belonged, why Thomas's death wasn't her fault, why she mattered. She read every word and believed none of it. On the 4th day, Elena broke down the door. "Enough," she said flatly. "We're talking." "There's nothing to say." "There's everything to say." Elena hauled her bodily from bed, starting with the fact that you're doing exactly what the world did, making yourself small, trying to disappear, believing your existence is burden. It is. Thomas would destroy you for this. Elena's voice cracked. "He was my friend for 182 years. I knew him when he was mortal, terrified, being burned at stake for his faith. You know what his last words were to me before he died?" Margot shook her head. "Finally, a worthy death." Elena's eyes shimmered. not killing for survival, not protecting from threat, but standing against hate that came specifically targeting innocence. He chose that death, Margot. Honor it by living the life he protected. I can't. Yes, you can, because you've survived worse than 3 days of grief. Elena pulled her to the window. See that? The courtyard below held the entire covenant. They'd built a memorial, simple stone with Thomas's name, dates, and a carved butterfly. They're not grieving you, Elena said. They're grieving him together while you hide. Be part of this family, Margot. The grieving and the living. Margot descended. The covenant made space for her in their circle. No one spoke. They simply stood together, 17 vampires and 1 mortal, honoring the one they'd lost. Nathaniel's hand found hers. She didn't pull away. That evening, he found her in the library. Can we talk? He asked. I've been terrible to you. You've been traumatized. There's a difference. He settled into the chair across from hers, giving space, always giving space. Do you want to leave? Yes, she admitted. And no, and I don't know. Then let me make this simple. Nathaniel leaned forward. The Southern Covenant won't stop. Whether you're here or not, they see the North as threat. We've always been threat, protecting mortals, refusing purity laws, building family from the rejected. You're not the cause. You're the excuse they needed. So I stay and everyone dies, or you stay and we fight together, or you leave and we still fight. But I do it knowing I've failed to protect the one person who made immortality matter. His voice dropped. I've lived 300 years preparing for this, Margot. I'm not afraid of war. I'm afraid of surviving it without you. That's not fair. Love isn't fair, Nathaniel finished. It's inconvenient and dangerous and makes you risk everything for someone who might not survive. His storm gray eyes held hers. But it's also the only thing in 3 centuries that's made me feel alive. Margot stood, pacing the library. You could have anyone, immortal, beautiful, uncomplicated. Why choose the mortal who brings war to your door? Because the others would be easy. He rose, tracking her movement. Because you make me work for it, question it, deserve it. He caught her hand as she passed. Because when I look at you, I don't see complications. I see someone who survived a different kind of war and came out soft instead of sharp. I'm not soft. I'm terrified. Fear and softness coexist beautifully. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You could have let that tower kill you. Could have taken those sleeping powders and never woken. Could have hardened into bitterness. But you wrote poetry instead, tended plants, chose every single day to remain capable of hope. His voice roughened. That's not weakness, Margot. That's the strongest thing I've ever witnessed. She looked at their joined hands. What if I can't be what you need? You already are. Nathaniel pulled her closer. I don't need perfect. I don't need immortal. I need you, exactly as you exist, choosing to stay despite every reason to run. They'll keep coming. Yes, people will die. Perhaps. His free hand lifted to her face. But they'll die fighting for something worth protecting. Thomas understood that. The Covenant understands that. The only person who doesn't is you. Margot closed her eyes. I'm so tired of being the reason people suffer. Then stop. His forehead pressed to hers. Stop making yourself responsible for others' hate. Stop believing your existence is burden. Stop trying to be small enough to avoid notice. His breath was cool against her skin. Be large, be present, be exactly who you are, and let us love you for it. I don't know how. Start by staying. His lips brushed her temple. Stay through the war. Stay through the grief. Stay through the moments you want to run. Just stay. The library was silent except for old wood settling, books breathing, and Margot's heart hammering against the impossible choice. Stay and risk everyone. Leave and lose everything. She thought of Thomas, choosing death protecting her. Of Elena, breaking down her door. Of the Covenant, building memorial instead of assigning blame. Of Nathaniel, 3 centuries old, telling her she made immortality matter. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I'll stay." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "But not because I believe I deserve this. Because you've all convinced me that deserving isn't the point. Showing up is." Nathaniel's smile could have resurrected the dead. "That's all we ask. And I want to fight." His expression shifted. "Margot." "No, listen." She gripped his hands tightly. "I won't hide in my room while people die for me. I won't be passive protection. If the Southern Covenant comes again, I stand with the family." She lifted her chin. "Teach me to fight. You're mortal. Then make me immortal." The words fell between them like dropped blade. Nathaniel went completely still, that vampire stillness that was absence of life. "You don't mean that." "I do." Margot's voice steadied. "Not because I'm running from mortality, not because I'm trying to be like you, but because I choose this family, and this family is immortal, and I want centuries to figure out who I am without the world's interference. The turning is painful, dangerous, permanent. I know." She stepped closer. "Elena told me. 3 days of feeling every cell die and resurrect, the hunger that follows, the learning to control strength that could accidentally kill. I know all of it, Nathaniel, and I still choose it." "Why?" "Because 4 weeks ago, I was locked in a tower waiting to die. Now I'm standing in a library surrounded by people who see my soul before my silhouette." Her eyes burned. "Because you taught me that bodies are just architecture, and I want time to build something beautiful in mine. Because Thomas died protecting mortal me, and I want to honor that by becoming someone who can protect others." "You could have a full mortal life. Living where? With who?" She laughed bitterly. "Return to the tower? Find new people who'll lock me away for being inconvenient? I've seen what mortal life offers people like me. It's cages in different shapes." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "Immortality is also a cage. You can never age, never change, never be told I'm too much or not enough based on how I look," Margot interrupted. "Never be locked away for taking up space, never be invisible because my body doesn't match their standards." She gripped his shirt. "I'll take that cage, Nathaniel. At least it's one I choose." He studied her face for a long moment. "You're certain?" "Completely." "Then we wait." At her protest, he continued, "Not denial, strategy. The Southern Covenant will attack again. When they do, you fight beside us as mortal. Prove you're warrior before you're immortal. Then, if you still choose it, I'll turn you myself." "Why wait?" "Because transformation is permanent, and I need you to be sure. Not grateful, not afraid, not trying to deserve us." His hands framed her face. "Sure, Margot. Absolutely certain that eternity is what you want, not what you think we need." She understood the wisdom in it, even as everything in her screamed for immediate change. How long? Until the next attack. Could be days, could be weeks. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Use the time. Train with Elena. Learn vampire history from Yuki. Understand exactly what you're choosing. And you. I'll be here." His smile was soft, falling deeper in love with you every moment you exist. The kiss was different this time, not gentle exploration, but promise. His mouth claimed hers with the certainty of someone who'd waited centuries for exactly this, and Margot kissed him back with the hunger of someone learning she was allowed to want. When they separated, both breathless despite only one of them needing air, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I will make you immortal," he promised. "But first, I'll make you warrior." Margot smiled against his lips. "Then let's begin." The Southern Covenant came on the full moon. 30 vampires, twice their previous number, led by Delilah with her arm healed and her fury absolute. They hit the estate at midnight when the Covenant was scattered, some hunting, some creating, some simply existing in the peace they'd built. Margot heard them first. She'd been training for 3 weeks. Elena's brutal combat lessons, Zara's poisons and healing, Marcus's strategy sessions. She wasn't vampire strong, but she was smart, quick, and absolutely done being protected. She rang the bell. The Covenant assembled in 2 minutes flat. 17 immortals and 1 mortal, facing down 30 attackers in the main courtyard. Moonlight turned everything silver and shadow. "Nathaniel Crow," Delilah's voice carried. "Surrender the mortal. This ends peacefully." "Nothing involving you ends peacefully, Delilah." Nathaniel stood at the front, Margot deliberately beside him. "And she's not mine to surrender. She belongs to herself. Then she dies with you. Then you die trying." Elena's grin was feral. The battle exploded. Margot had studied violence in books. Living it was different. Chaos and blood and speed her mortal eyes could barely track. But she'd trained for this. She carried silver blades dipped in Zara's paralyzing poison, and she used them. A vampire lunged at her. She ducked, struck upward, blade finding the gap between ribs. The poison worked instantly, paralysis, not death, giving David time to stake the immobilized attacker. "Good!" Elena shouted, taking down 2 opponents simultaneously. "Stay moving!" Margot moved. She wasn't strongest or fastest, but she was unpredictable. Mortals weren't supposed to fight vampires. The Southern Covenant kept underestimating her, giving her openings she exploited with vicious efficiency. She saved Yuki from an ambush, covered Marcus's blind side, worked with the Covenant like she'd been part of it for centuries instead of weeks. And she watched Nathaniel fight. He was beautiful and terrible, alpha power unleashed, taking on 5 opponents simultaneously. Every movement was precision, every strike was certain. He fought like someone protecting everything that mattered, and Margot understood. She'd given him reason to survive his immortality. Then Delilah broke through. She moved faster than thought, appearing behind Margot with wooden stake raised. "The mortal dies first." Nathaniel was there instantly, but not fast enough. The stake plunged downward, and Margot caught it. She'd trained for this. Elena's lesson: vampires expect fear, use rage instead. Margot grabbed the stake with both hands, ignoring the splinters tearing her palms, and twisted. Delilah stumbled. Nathaniel's hand punched through her chest. "Touch her again," he said softly, holding Delilah's heart. "And I'll spend eternity hunting every vampire you've ever turned." He released her. She fled, her remaining forces following. Silence fell like snow. The Covenant had won, lost 3 of their number, but won. And Margot stood in the center of carnage, bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, covered in ash and blood, absolutely alive. "You fought," Nathaniel said, wonder in his voice. "I survived." Margot dropped the broken stake. "Now turn me." "Margot, I'm sure." She stepped over ash marks toward him. "I was sure 3 weeks ago. I'm certain now. I choose this. I choose you. I choose centuries of becoming who I would have been if the world hadn't tried to erase me." Elena whooped. The Covenant circled them. Nathaniel's hands trembled as they framed her face. "It will hurt. I've survived worse. You'll never age. Good. I'll have time to heal. You'll need to feed. Then teach me mercy while I do it." She gripped his wrists. "Stop giving me reasons to refuse. I'm choosing eternity, Nathaniel. Let me have it." His smile was broken and beautiful. "Then we do this properly. The Covenant bears witness." He looked at his family. "You all agree? She's earned this?" "She was family before she fought," Marcus said. "Now she's legend." "Do it," Elena commanded, "before I bite her myself." Nathaniel looked back at Margot. "Last chance to be mortal. First chance to be free." She tilted her head, exposing her throat. Make me immortal. His kiss landed on her pulse point first, reverent, gentle. Then his fangs pierced skin. The pain was everything and nothing, burning and ice, every nerve igniting simultaneously. She felt her blood leave, felt something else enter, felt the transformation begin at cellular level. Nathaniel's arms held her as she collapsed, his voice in her ear. 3 days, I'll be here for every moment. You won't die alone. Margot wanted to say she'd never been alone since he crashed through her tower window. But consciousness was fading, and the transformation was pulling her under. Her last thought before darkness claimed her. I'm becoming. 3 days later, Margot woke to hunger. Not food hunger. This was deeper, cellular, demanding. She opened her eyes and the world was different. Colors sharper, sounds louder. She could hear 17 heartbeats throughout the estate, could smell blood and life and breathe. Nathaniel's voice beside her. I know it's overwhelming. She turned her head, and he was there, still beautiful, but now she could see the truth of him, the absolute stillness, the way light reflected wrong, the predator beneath the man. I'm like you, she whispered. You're better than me. He helped her sit. You chose this knowing the cost. I ran from death. There's a difference. Margot looked at her hands, same shape, but when she flexed, she felt strength that could shatter stone. How do I control this? We teach you, together. He kissed her forehead. Welcome to eternity, Margot Thorne. Now we begin the real work, becoming who you were always meant to be. She stood, steady despite newborn immortality, and looked out the window. The world sprawled below, infinite and waiting. What do I do first? She asked. Whatever you want. Nathaniel's hand found hers. You have forever to figure it out. Margot smiled, fangs sharp against her lip, and felt something she'd never experienced in her mortal life. Absolute freedom. Then let's start, she said, by tearing down every tower in this kingdom, so no one else has to wait for a vampire to tell them they're worthy of rescue. Nathaniel's laugh was pure joy. Now you understand. Immortality isn't about living forever. It's about making forever count. And Margot Thorne, who'd been locked away for taking up space, stepped into eternity, ready to take up all the space she wanted. Subscribe if you believe love can resurrect even the broken. And that sometimes, the monster climbing through your window is actually your salvation. Comment eternal if you choose forever for the chance to become who the world tried to erase. Like if you understand that the body is just architecture, but the soul is the masterpiece.